There is a moment when the sun disappears, when darkness falls, and you're left with just your fears. That's the moment you feel your first pang of doubt. That's the moment when the night comes out.
Radio is a weird industry, and it's not like it used to be. I mean, take a look. You're listening to a podcast. But there are still DJs and radio talk show hosts out there. It's a strange and isolating job, working in a radio studio. A radio host may have co-hosts and a producer, but it's still just a disembodied voice talking into the ether, only knowing you've reached someone if they happen to call in. If you happen to be a vitriolic political talk show host and you work the night shift, the calls you get might be just a little bit horrifying. Our next tale is essentially a conversation, a discussion between a psychopath and another man whose voice is on the air, talking to thousands nightly. We'll leave it to you to decide if the man on the phone is really the crazy one, or the man on the radio. Because you can never be too sure who might be on the other end of the line, especially when the night comes out. No, you cannot sell me that crap. Don't push that nonsense down my throat. The mayor, the commissioner, the chief of police, and the entire Milwaukee police force is incompetent. That's because we elected Democrats for the city, and they're turning it into a cesspool. Suddenly we have to worry about the criminals' rights and be soft on crime. They want to enact gun control within the city limits while this Ripper guy is running around slicing and dicing up women left and right. 10 women, 10 of them in just 6 months. How can you tell me that this administration is even remotely competent? Jack Handel was on a roll. It had been a slow night for the first hour of his radio show, but now the bleeding heart callers were coming in fast and furious, and he was pegging the needle on the VU meter into the red with his yelling. The people loved that stuff. It was the yelling and screaming that had made him the #1 nighttime talk radio host in Milwaukee, and it was what was making the big station and network from Chicago want to talk to him. This Milwaukee Ripper thing was just the icing on the cake. Some nut was sneaking into people's homes and carrying pretty blonde women off to slice and dice them. The medical examiner was on television all the time now and giving gruesome details about the torture of each woman and the organs that had been removed. The police were flummoxed, and it was the perfect topic for Jack to dig his teeth into.
Look, Jack, that's just crazy,
the caller Dave said.
I mean, it's not exactly easy to catch guys like this. Serial killers are just...
No, Jack interrupted. The only way this guy is going to be caught is if every resident of Milwaukee gets a gun. Then, gun this son of a bitch down in front of your house. But the city wants stricter gun laws, and you had better believe that the president is watching. He's behind all of this. Remember that the president came to town and threw his support behind Crandall's mayoral run. It's a toehold for the Democrats in the Republican state of Wisconsin and the ultimate takedown of our governor. When that happens, the entire state will enact stricter gun laws, and that will eventually spread to the entire country. This is all a conspiracy, and people are dying. It's going to lead to a police state not only for Wisconsin, but for the entire country.
Jack, you're spouting conspiracy theories again, and that's just crazy,
the caller replied. And you're just part of the sheeple out there, Dave. Get off my phone. Jack yelled and hit the button. That's what you get, people. That's what you get when these Democrats get any semblance of power. You get people who believe that the government is competent and going to solve everyone's problems. We know that's not true, don't we? Okay, I have to take a break. More calls after this on the Jack Handel Show. Jack hit the button for the commercials, and the computer took over. It was going to be a long commercial since Jack had gone over on time with that last caller. He liked to keep the feisty ones, the ones who were willing to fight back, on the phone a bit longer. He needed a smoke break. Good call there, Bobby. Jack called to his producer and call screener behind the glass. I need a Nick fix. We're gonna be away for almost 7 minutes, Jack, so go ahead. Bobby replied. Jack pulled his pack of cigarettes out of his pocket and went out of the studio. His feet clacked against the polished floors. He was headed for the stairwell. The studio was actually high above downtown Milwaukee, so heading down to the parking garage was out of the question. The building's management was not happy about the smoking in the stairwell, but just let them find Jack. He could afford it. Jack pushed through the door and lit up as the door swung shut. The cement floor beneath his feet was littered with other butts from other station employees who had done the same thing. Jack exhaled and watched the smoke curl up and away. How had he gotten here? He had been in the radio business since just after college, and of course, just as he got his first job, the entire business changed. Now, so many of the greats that had inspired him had gone on to podcasting or satellite radio. He had graduated knowing how to edit reel-to-reel tape with a grease pencil and razor blade just in time for everything to go digital. He was in his 40s now, and he had a gut and was losing his hair on top, while the stuff left on the side went gray. He had destroyed his lungs with smoking and probably had several tumors growing somewhere inside him thanks to the cigs. Still, he was alive, and he was finally succeeding in this business. He had a hot girlfriend and big opportunities. From playing shitty music in a small town in Montana to the #1 nighttime talk show in a major city, not bad at all. He was on the internet too, and had a lot of people all over the world who listened. This Ripper thing, though, man, what a lucky break that was. Of course, it was tragic how many women had been brutally kidnapped, tortured, and murdered, but that hardly mattered to Jack. It was selfish, but you had to be ruthless in this business. It was what had gotten him where he was. Jack inhaled a few more times, deeply, quickly, and sent more clouds of smoke into the stair. Then he dropped the butt and squashed it beneath his feet. Back to the screaming. Jack headed back to the studio, refreshed, the nicotine rushing through his body and mixing with the caffeine he had ingested with the several cups of coffee he had downed. His heart was pounding, and he felt ready to go into battle. Got a good one for me, Bob? Jack asked as he entered the studio. Got Mel on line 1, and I think he's a good one, Bob replied. Jack gave a thumbs up and got back into his seat. A moment later, the headphones were on, and he heard the end of the last commercial and then the bumper music that reintroduced the show. And we're back, Jack said. Thanks for tuning in tonight. It's been quite a night, hasn't it? We're talking about the Milwaukee Ripper, as he's become known. The cowardly bastard who's been entering people's homes, carrying young women away, torturing and killing them. They say that when a serial killer escalates things, they make mistakes, making them easier to capture. But our incompetent politicians and law enforcement officials can't do a thing. The bleeding heart liberals out there are soft on crime, and they are a cancer here in Milwaukee, eating away at the rest of this proud conservative state. So we're gonna go back to your calls. Jack looked down at his call screen. We have Mel from the South Side, Jack said and punched a button. Welcome to the Jack Handel Show, Mel. What's on your mind?
Killing.
Jack froze for a moment. That was not the answer that he was expecting. He looked up at Bob behind the glass, but Bob was lining up more calls and not paying attention. Pardon? Jack asked.
Killing is on my mind, Mr. Handel,
Mel replied.
It's what I do. I called to talk to you because you've been going on and on and on for nights about me. I felt it was only appropriate that I respond.
Jack felt a chill go through him. The man's voice was like ice, and it squirmed all over the place, through Jack's ears and down into his gut. Okay, Mel, Jack said. Very funny. So you're the Milwaukee Ripper, right? Do you have any idea how many crazies we get calling in here every night?
I thought you might feel that way,
said Mel.
That's why I have a friend here with me, to try and convince you.
There was a shuffling noise as the phone was moved around, and Jack heard Mel talking to someone off mic in a very harsh tone. A moment later, there was more shuffling and the sound of heavy breathing in the phone. It was obviously a female, and the heavy breathing quickly became crying.
Speak. Please help me.
The woman cried.
Oh God, he has a knife and he's gonna kill me. Please, please, Okay, that's enough.
There was more shuffling, and the crying and breathing vanished from the phone. A moment later, there was an odd crackling noise that Jack recognized as a strip of duct tape being removed from a roll. The crying was gone, and Mel was back on the line.
So, are you ready to talk?
Mel asked.
If so, I have several conditions, Jack.
Jack licked his lips. His mouth was dry and his heart was hammering. This had to be a joke, right? This kind of thing didn't happen. How do I know this isn't a joke? Jack asked, his voice feeling pinched.
I don't know what else to tell you, Jack. You can hang up on me if you want, but the police will find another dead body tomorrow. You have a chance to save her, however, if you follow my rules.
There was a long silence, just dead air. Jack didn't know what to say.
Come on, Jack. You can be a hero. Imagine the press, the ratings. You're going national soon and moving to the big town of Chicago, right? How about heading down Michigan Avenue as a hero? What do you have to lose?
Jack licked his lips again. He wanted to smoke very bad. What are the rules? Jack asked.
Simple,
Mel replied.
You keep me on the line for at least an hour. No commercials. If you call the cops, I hang up and she dies. If you leave the studio or take a commercial break, she dies. If you try to trace the call, she dies.
How will you know if we've called the police or are tracing the call? Jack asked.
I have my ways,
Mel said.
There's all kind of technology you can get now that lets you see all kinds of things. For example, I can tell that you're sweating like a pig right now, and producer Bob is looking around trying to figure out what the hell to do.
Jack looked around the studio frantically. How did he know that? Jack looked up at Bob and saw that his producer and screener was holding the phone halfway to his head, eyes wide, panic on his face. Jack looked to his left and saw the laptop that he always brought into the studio with him. The laptop with the built-in webcam. Damn, Jack thought. Bob has a laptop in there too. There were also built-in microphones. Jack had heard that hackers had technology that could hack into the laptops and use the microphones and webcams to spy on people.
Ah, you've thought of the laptops,
Mel said.
Very good. Shut off the laptop and she dies, by the way. If I sense anything funny, she dies. Oh, and this needs to be a conversation, Jack. I'll ask you questions too, and I want honest answers. If I think you're lying, she dies.
Jack breathed heavily and wanted to run. He wanted to run right now. What do I get if I agree to this? Jack asked.
She'll live,
Mel said.
I will release her tomorrow morning, relatively unharmed. You'll get great press and ratings and be a hero.
Jack didn't know what to do. He looked up at Bob, and Bob just shrugged. This is insane, Jack thought. This is utterly mad. This had to be a joke. But what if? Jack the Ripper had sent letters to local papers and the police bragging of his crimes. Son of Sam had done similar things, as had the Zodiac and BTK. What was the difference? The Milwaukee Ripper wanted to talk to him and his audience, but how was he going to keep the cops away? There was no good answer for that. It would take time for people to make calls. The station was empty. The station manager and program director were probably sound asleep right now. They would be awakened by someone, surely, but that might take an hour. By the time a detective showed up because a listener called, it might take an hour. What did he have to lose? Jack had the gift of gab, and maybe something the man said would help. He could be a hero if this worked.
What do you say, Jack?
Jack looked up at Bob and waved his hands. Then he leaned in and pushed a button while speaking into a secondary microphone. Have Tom and Dale been called? Jack asked. I have no idea, replied Bob. You can't do this, Jack. This is insane. He's watching via the laptops, Jack said. Don't move. Don't answer the phone. Someone somewhere will call the cops and someone will call Tom and Dale. This is crazy, Jack, Bob said.
I need an answer, Jack,
Mel said. Jack cleared his throat. He adjusted himself to get comfortable in his seat and looked at the clock. It was just after midnight. He had to go until just a little past 1 a.m. He could do this. Okay, Mel, Jack said. Let's do this. Jack said. So, how do we do this? Any question? Mel said.
You bet. Ask away. I can, of course, choose not to answer.
Jack cleared his throat again. Who are you? Mel laughed and said,
Yeah, like I'm just gonna tell you that. Very funny, Jack. I've always appreciated your sense of humor. No, I'm not going to tell you that. Mel works fine.
Jack said, Why Mel?
The idiot press called me the Milwaukee Ripper, so I just shortened that to Mel.
Jack said, You don't like that name?
It's stupid. So unoriginal.
What name would you prefer? Mel sighed, and his lips flapped rather comically.
Good question, Jack. I'll have to come back to you on that. Just call me Mel for now.
Jack said, Fine, we'll stick with Mel. So, tell me, have you been killing for a long time?
Oh yes, for a while. Humans for a relatively short amount of time. I killed a lot of animals when I was a kid.
Jack said, So the typical psychopath route. You tortured kitties and mommy didn't love you and now you have to kill women?
Not kittens, no, Jack. The first thing was a mouse. A mouse I found out in the yard and held in my hand. That feeling of power was amazing. Knowing that I could crush it or strangle it or bash its head in, and that its death was entirely within my control. It was the greatest feeling.
There was silence for a moment. Mel said,
How'd you get into radio, Jack?
I started in college. The university I was in had just started a brand new radio station on the campus, and I joined up. I did afternoons, played jazz. After that, it took me time volunteering at other stations until I got a paid job. It was in the middle of freaking nowhere.
You played music, right?
I did. Mel asked.
How did you turn into the jerk that you are today?
How did you turn into the murderous psycho that you are today? Mel laughed.
The first girl was back in college, much like you, I guess. She was so beautiful, Jack, and I wanted her so bad. However, I was too shy and scared to do anything. I knew she wouldn't want me. I had to have her. It had been a while since killing animals had given me that rush that I needed. I started stalking her, walking behind her. I sneaked into her apartment late at night and crept around while she slept. I'd steal things and rearrange the furniture just to see if I could get away with it. Then one night I got in and she was sleeping, and she woke up while I was in the room. I was on her immediately, and that rush returned, only it was 1,000 times more intense than it had ever been with the animals. I didn't have a knife or anything, so I just used my bare hands. Do you have any idea how much strength it takes to strangle someone?
Jack said, No, Mel, I'm not a murderous bastard.
I looked into her eyes, and there was this sadness there. Her eyes got so wide, and there was a question there. She wanted to know why. She wanted to know why I couldn't see that she was a fellow human being and just stop. Well, I couldn't stop, Jack. I couldn't.
Jack ran a hand across his forehead, and it came away slick with sweat. I did play music for a long time, but it was obvious that my job as a DJ was not going to get me anywhere, Jack said. I was stuck in the middle of Montana and the winters really sucked. Granted, Wisconsin isn't much better. I managed to convince the program director to let me fill in on a talk show at an AM station that the company also owned. I started doing the political stuff and the switchboard went crazy. People called in and I started arguing with them and more people called in. Before too long, I was doing overnights on the AM station in the middle of nowhere. Thanks to the internet, I was soon being heard by a lot of people. Mel asked,
Tell me, Jack, do you actually believe the bullshit that you spout every night, or is it an act? And remember, a young woman's life hangs in the balance here.
Do you believe that you're doing something good or noble or right when you kill and eviscerate these women? Jack asked. Mel sighed.
No, Jack. I know that to the rest of humanity that I am a monster. I just feel that I am evolved much further than the rest of humanity. I have transcended the mortal bonds that hold you and the rest of the weak world back. I have become godlike, and it is my right as a god to be able to choose who lives and who dies. Don't you ever feel like a god, Jack? You sit there and choose who gets to say what and who's right and who isn't. You hang up on people all the time. You feel control from that. You spout something and you have hundreds, maybe thousands of listeners who then believe what you say. Sometimes they do things because of what you say, don't they?
Jack felt as if he had been slapped across the face. What are you talking about? Mel replied.
My turn, Jack. Are the things you spout there just an act?
Jack said, I believe what I say, Mel. I have convictions. I believe that this country is going to hell and that you're a prime example of that. I believe that there are more like you out there. Some of them want to hunt down women or men, but some want to put bombs at the end of marathons or shoot up restaurants. You're all the same. What separates you from a common terrorist, Mel? There was a long pause. Jack thought that maybe the connection had been cut and he felt a sense of pure panic.
You're lying, Jack.
Mel said at last, a touch of glee in his voice. Jack replied, How dare you?
I have ways, Jack.
Mel answered.
There's ways of discerning if someone is telling the truth by their voice. Did you know that? There's software you can download that analyzes a person's voice and can determine if there's deception. You're being deceptive. Penalties must be assessed.
Jack felt that panic rise to insane levels. No, wait, stop! There was shuffling and then the sound of a woman screaming. Her voice was muffled as if she still had a gag in her mouth, but it was panicked. Then her voice grew louder and she screamed more intensely. Jack yelled. Of course I don't believe everything I say. God damn it, I don't know anyone who does, do you? I believe a lot of it, but sometimes I say things just to get a rise out of people. Mel came back on the line, and the screaming and whimpering faded.
That was your one chance, Jack. Don't lie to me again. So, you're really an entertainer, not some great political mind? Did you study politics in school or anything?
Jack bit his lip. That was hitting below the belt, or so he thought. I do strive to entertain people. I studied communications in school, but I didn't graduate. Mel said.
So you didn't study psychology or anything like that? Nothing that would give you an insight into how people might react to stimuli? How the mentally ill people react to things like the stuff that spews out of your mouth? Nothing like that?
No, Jack said. Why do you kill women? Mel replied.
Why do you eat pieces of cake or choose what you have for dinner, Jack? I have no idea. I'm not homosexual. I was not abused by my mother when I was a child. I'm about as normal as you can get.
Except that you kidnap, torture, and eviscerate women.
Yes, except for that, but even that I think is normal.
Mel replied.
I mean, how many times have you been angry at someone and wanted to kill them? We're all animals, Jack, but we spend so much energy imprisoning that animal. It takes up so much of our thoughts, our brain. You know how they say we only use such a small percentage of our brain? I think I use more because I don't spend time reining in the animal.
So you kill all the time? Jack asked. I don't think so. You've killed 10 in 6 months. If you never reined in the animal, you'd just be killing day in and day out.
Not really. The urge comes when it comes. Just like when you get the urge to go out for ice cream. I get the urge to be with a beautiful woman and I go out and find one. I take my time choosing the right one and then make my move. Afterward, I'm satisfied.
How is that more evolved? Jack asked. Can't you see that's depraved? Have you no conscience?
What about you, Jack?
Mel said.
Can we talk about what happened in Idaho? I think you had a talk show back in Boise for a time, correct? Can we talk about what happened there?
Jack sputtered. How the hell did he know? Well, you could find anything on the internet, but he'd been going under a different name back then, and he looked different than he did today. I don't know what you're referring to.
Come on, Jack, don't lie.
Mel said, the smile evident in his voice.
Never lie to me, remember? What just happened? I just cut a woman because you lied. Do you want me to slit her throat so the last thing you hear from our female friend is her gurgling on her own blood as she dies? Is that what you want? Talk to me about Boise.
Jack sighed. Yes, I had a show there for a time. I've been doing nights for a while now and had another overnight show there too. I went by the name Steve Billings then, though. I just finished up my shifts in Montana, and the Boise station offered me what seemed like a fortune at the time.
Doing political stuff again, right?
Yes, like I do now.
Railing against the Democrats and talking about the evils of progressive thinking and liberalism.
Are you a liberal?
Not now, Jack. If anything, I'm a libertine, but we can discuss that later. Tell me about Seymour Whitaker.
Jack felt an icy hand clench around his heart. Damn it, he thought.
Jack, if I'm coming clean with my life, you have to come clean with yours,
Mel said.
Seymour was a regular caller, correct? A guy who liked to call in and agree with you about conspiracy theories about things like the Illuminati and the Masons, correct?
Jack hung his head. Yes.
What happened?
Seymour called in almost every night. Jack said quietly, the VU meters barely moving. He was fun. I made fun of him and he told me jokes back. I was very into the conspiracy theory thing back then. Well, if you look at it, the government is out there to get our guns, crush our religious beliefs, and make us their slaves.
Stay on track, Jack.
Yeah, Jack replied. I guess so, sorry. Anyway, Seymour was always there. The listeners loved him. One night he called in, I think it was a Thursday night, and we were going on and on about the governor's race and how the Idaho Democrats were plotting to take over to make gay marriage legal, shove that gay agenda down our throats, to change the state and make it liberal, to allow immigrants in and make them legal and give them jobs. I told Seymour that they were coming for his job. He worked as a gardener in a local park. Jack fell silent. His throat felt lined with broken glass, and his tongue was like a piece of sandpaper.
Seymour didn't like that, did he?
Mel asked.
What did Seymour do that Friday night?
Jack closed his eyes. He was back there in Boise on that Friday night when he heard. He walked into the Democratic Party headquarters in downtown Boise with a gun. He killed 11 before the cops showed up and took him down. Jack did feel a bit of weight lift off of his shoulders, but he also felt sick. Had he just lost the Chicago job? Did that matter?
What happened to you?
Mel asked. Nothing, Jack replied. I mean, the local papers ran stories and liberal media blamed me for it, but the cops interviewed me and determined that I hadn't actually done anything. Seymour was crazy and he was gonna go off whether he talked to me or not.
But you don't think that's the case, do you?
Jack hung his head. No.
You think Seymour might have been a bit disturbed, but until you came to town and started filling his head with delusions and paranoid fantasies and thoughts, he was just a slightly eccentric gardener, right? You think that you gave him a purpose in a quiet and boring life that he hated. Once he had a target for that building resentment and rage for a life that he didn't want, your words pushed him over the edge.
Silence. Jack held his head down.
Right, Jack?
Yes, God damn it, yes! Jack yelled. More silence. What, do you think that makes us twins? Jack asked. Is that what this proves? Do you think that because I said something and one very disturbed individual went and did something, this somehow shows that we're the same? It doesn't, Mel. It doesn't. If I said something, it was an accident that it fell into the wrong ears, and that person did something. You go out and deliberately find someone, kidnap them, torture them despite their pleas to live, and kill them. We are not the same.
Do you believe in God, Jack?
No, it's my turn, Jack shouted, spittle flying from his lips and hitting the microphone. Tell me about your childhood, Mel. What happened to turn you into a monster? Did your daddy beat you or not give you enough hugs? Did mommy not sing to you at night? What excuse do you have for being the hideous, twisted thing that you are?
Is that what you think, Jack?
Mel asked. He did not sound upset or angry in the least. He was calm, amused.
Is that the pop psychology that you get when you hear about a guy like me? You remember the movies, or perhaps the big long speech that psychiatrist guy gives at the end of the movie Psycho, and think that you know the inner workings of my mind? Mel goes out and slices and dices women, so he must have a mommy fixation. Do you think I dress up like my mother, speak in her voice, think I hear voices in my head? Do you imagine me in some hovel or trailer being beaten by my father or groped by a cousin?
Mel laughed. It was a short, dry bark devoid of any kind of humor. Jack let the silence stretch out. It was a technique that he had used over the years to add to the drama of the situations. If you ran into a silence, let it go on. Don't feel obliged to chime in. Let the person being questioned get uncomfortable and fall into the pit.
No, Jack,
Mel said at last.
Is it so hard to imagine that I had a very normal childhood? That my mom and dad loved me and doted on me and gave me presents for Christmas and my birthday every year? It's easier for you to imagine people like me having horrible childhoods because people like me have to have an origin story, a story like a comic book superhero or supervillain. I have to have been set on this path because people like me cannot simply be. Do you believe in God, Jack?
Yes, Jack said. Yes, I believe in God.
Then how does God create someone like me?
Mel asked.
If you believe in God and someone like me gets born, someone who cannot feel what you feel or experience the things that you do, how can I be a monster and an abomination? If God created me, am I just not one of his creations?
I don't think it works that way, Jack said. Evil is in the world, that's just the way it is.
But God knew that it was going to be in the world, didn't he?
Mel asked.
If you believe God knows all, then it was a rigged game from the start. He knew Adam and Eve would fall. He knew about the Huns, the Crusades, the Salem witch trials, the genocides in World War I and World War II, Hitler, Jack the Ripper, John Wayne Gacy, Ted Bundy, Charles Whitman, Charles Starkweather, Charlie Manson, and he knew about me. Yet here I am, and there they were. He did nothing to stop any of them.
That's not how it works, Jack said. God is there, but it's up to us to change, to find him and change.
So you believe that the only reason to do good is because God is keeping track?
Mel asked.
Would you be me without God?
No, Jack said. That's not how it works either. I know plenty of people who don't believe in God and they don't kill.
Because of empathy.
Mel replied.
They see another person and there's some instant connection there. They understand that person because they can sympathize. You look at a homeless woman and may feel repulsed and wish she wasn't there and act disgusted, but you know she's a fellow human being and you sympathize that she might have had a hard time. You may cross the street, but you don't feel that urge to strangle her while looking into her eyes or to pick up a rock and bash her brains in, right?
Of course, Jack said, licking his lips. He had been staring at the VU meters and the control board in front of him, oblivious. Of course that's how it works.
I don't feel that, Jack. I never have. I mean, I've spent years honing my ability to interact with humanity, but you should have seen me as a kid. I would sit there with no expressions on my face, confused by the people laughing and smiling, crying and screaming around me. I realized something was wrong with me. I felt nothing. I was empty. I was nothing. So I created me. I practiced emotions in the mirror. I would listen to sitcoms and practice laughing with the studio audience or laugh track. I eventually became able of looking and acting normal in civilized society, but it's all an act. I feel nothing.
I can't relate to that, Jack said. I felt nothing but guilt and horror after what happened in Idaho. I was sick to my stomach. I quit the business for 2 years. I'd worked at a Home Depot. It was a long time before I thought I could get back into this business. These days, I try to stay away from the conspiracy theories, although it's tough. I mean, I've been saying for weeks now that the local city government is incompetent, but I haven't said that you are a direct result of that. I haven't said that the democratic beliefs lead directly to you.
And yet you came back on the air and started spouting conspiracy nonsense anyway.
Mel said. I don't think it's nonsense, Jack said. What about you? Why do you keep killing? Are you just going to keep killing? If you're never caught or killed, are you just gonna keep killing women? What's your end game here?
There is no end game, Jack,
Mel replied.
I live in the now. I live for today. That's part of being a sociopath, Jack. This isn't a career move. I have a job. I look like anyone and everyone else. That's the thing that people forget about. They see pictures of Charlie Manson and they assume that's what I look like. They forget that Charlie himself didn't kill any of the people he was accused of killing. His followers did. They forget that Ted Bundy was just a normal guy, a handsome guy, a likable guy. I would not be able to do what I do and get away with it as long as I have without just looking like a guy you'd see on the street every single day. I look like your neighbor or your friend.
You're a monster, Jack whispered.
No, I'm a human being,
Mel said.
That's what really scares them. People want to believe I have horns and fangs and claws. They don't want to imagine that I wear a suit, drive a Mercedes, have a home in a suburb with a manicured lawn, and that I go buy my groceries at the same places that you go to. If you passed me on the street, you'd think nothing about it. That's the real gift. I'm easy to forget. If you were to see me walking out of a home just after I'd chopped up a girl, you wouldn't look twice. That's what your God created, Jack.
Stop talking about God, Jack said.
No, let's talk about God some more, Jack,
Mel said, the glee in his voice very evident.
You all want to talk about how he's love and light and everything good. Have you read the Old Testament? God and his supposed chosen people spent a lot of time killing entire cities, including children. Why? Because God is an asshole, and he always has been. He creates humans and then plants that goddamn tree in the middle of the garden and tells them not to eat of it. A rigged game. He knew they would because he created those people, and then he spends so much of his time punishing people for not believing in him. He's like the popular girl in high school who somehow becomes the authority over who is and who isn't popular and who gets invited to all of the parties. Oh, like me and do this my way, or you get banished to this horrible place for eternity. Sounds more like a petty teen than a deity. If God really sends some teenager from some hidden village to hell because he doesn't believe in Jesus, despite the fact there was no way the kid could ever hear about Jesus, then who's the real monster? If believing in Jesus really gets you into paradise, what about all of those Jews who died in the Holocaust? Are they all in hell? Did God allow those people, his supposed children and chosen ones, to die horribly just to send them to hell to be further tortured for all eternity? Tell me I am not more in God's image than you, Jack, because it seems to me that God is really a total and complete sociopath and asshole.
Stop it, Jack screamed. What do you believe in, Mel? Nothing. You believe in nothing, so you live for nothing. You have nothing. No love, no emotions, nothing that brings you joy save for that tiny, quickly vanished, perverse thrill in taking someone else's life. What is that? That's nothing. You contribute nothing to the world. You accomplish nothing. Your life has no meaning, and when you die, you'll be nothing. Sure, there was a time when a psychopath like you generated attention and people cared, but now you're just another name that only matters locally. You think anyone in New York or Chicago or anywhere else cares about you? You're big news here in a small city, but you're also just the latest in a list that includes bigger names like Ed Gein and Jeffrey Dahmer. That means you aren't even original. Prince Vlad killed more people with more flair than you, and Jack the Ripper did the exact same thing you're doing over 100 years ago. You're a footnote. Silence for a long time. Jack licked his lips, his eyes fixed on the VU meter that lay flat off to the left. There was a soft hiss in the air over his headphones, but nothing. Dead air.
You're right, Jack,
Mel said.
You're right, of course, but I'm still here talking to you and the entire city. I'm still causing fear in everyone who walks the streets. It may not mean a lot in the long run. I might be imitating better artists than myself, but at least I'm trying.
Imagine what you could accomplish if you had turned that desire into something constructive, Jack said. I feel sorry for you, Mel.
Don't you dare,
Mel replied.
Don't you dare say you feel sorry for me. I don't need your pity. I feel sorry for you, sitting there on your chair, spouting off in an empty room. You pretend you're contributing when you're just dividing people. You appeal to ignorant people who don't want to think for themselves. They want their opinions fed to them like baby food. They want you to confirm their fears than you do. You pretend that you're doing the greater good, exposing corruption, saving the republic, but you're not. You're arguing with yourself, talking to an empty room, giving speeches for people who already agree with you. You don't change minds or do any good, Jack. You just spout off. Verbal ejaculation. So, my friend, I pity you.
Mel breathed heavy into the phone. Jack closed his eyes. He wouldn't admit it on the air, but those words cut, and they were correct.
Well, looks like you have company in the studio,
Mel said. Jack finally raised his head. He looked into Bob's booth. The station manager and program director were there. However, there were also several other men in suits, all of them with badges hanging out of pockets.
I said no police, Jack,
Mel said. Jack felt panic. No, I had no control over that. I just talked to you. Jack looked up at the clock. They had been talking for over an hour. We made it past an hour, Mel, Jack said. We talked for an hour and no cops were here. I honored my deal.
It was fun talking to you, Jack,
Mel said.
I hope we can chat again sometime.
Wait, are you gonna let the girl go? Jack asked. I met our obligations. You have to let her go.
Goodbye, Jack,
Mel said. Wait! There was a click, and the line went dead. Jack sat there for a long time, just staring at the board. Several times he tried to speak, but the words were not there. Bob eventually snapped out of his reverie and shoved a tape into the machine and started playing the first hour over again. Jack still sat there, stunned, unable to move. It wasn't until the station manager and the two detectives came into the studio and helped him to his feet that he was able to move. Come on, Jack, the station manager said. Let's go talk to these gentlemen. I did it, Jack said quietly, feeling exhausted, his emotions barely in check. I kept him on for an hour. He has to let her go. Jack looked at the detectives with pleading eyes. He has to let her go, he said. Just come with us, Mr. Handel, said the detective on the left. He was tall and young-looking, with a beak-like nose and dark hair. We'll just talk. Jack wasn't sure that he could talk at all, but they found a room and he sat down. It turned out he could talk a lot more. It was near dawn when the police finally let Jack go. There was no way to be sure that the man on the phone was the Ripper, but apparently he had called the cops a few times and left a few voice messages, and the two detectives said the voice there sounded a lot like the one that had been talking to Jack. They were unsure if any kind of crime had been committed. Technically, Jack hadn't done anything to inhibit the investigation, but the cops felt he should have called them regardless of what the man said. Jack didn't argue. He couldn't. He went on and on about what happened and guaranteed that he did not know the man who was on the phone. This was not something he had arranged in advance. He forked over his cell phone and allowed them access to his emails to prove that he had never before heard from the man on the phone. Then they let him go. Jack had no idea what would happen to the job in Chicago. He felt defeated. He felt exhausted. He got his coat and shuffled for the elevator. Just as he got there, one of the detectives ran up to him. Mr. Handel, he said. We just got a call from headquarters. A young blonde woman was found on the side of the road. She was nearly naked and was wounded, including a nasty cut on her face, but she says the Ripper had her all night, and she says she was the one on the phone. Jack once again felt words escape him. For a broadcaster with a gift for gab, he found that words tend to fail you when you need them the most. Instead, he felt a tear streak down his face. You may be a hero after all, Jack, the detective said and smiled. I just wanted you to know. Jack shook the man's hand, and then he got onto the elevator. By the time he got to the ground floor, he was weeping like a baby. He headed for the door and stepped out just as the light hit his face. It was going to be a very nice day. The thing to remember is that Jack may be a hero in this detective's eyes, but Mel is still out there, still lurking, still looking for his next victim. He may have, for now, kept his sanity intact, but you never know what will happen the next night, or the one after that. It's how the game is played when the night comes out. You've been listening to When the Night Comes Out, a weekly horror anthology podcast with stories by Brian W. Alaspa and narrated by Allie James. For Brian's work, visit his website at www.brianwalaspa.com. Be sure to listen to Allie's work on Facebook at Allie James Projects.